We're finally up and running. It's a good thing I came over here 15 minutes earlier. We'd be starting at 9:30. Thank you for your patience. So my name is Lisa Dixon. I know most of you in the room, but if we haven't met, I work in online education as an instructional technologist. So today we're going to talk about creating engaging online discussion prompts. I consider you guys the experts in teaching because you are. So if you want to jump in, give suggestions, talk about what you do in your courses, absolutely, please feel free to do that. So what I'm going to cover is some challenges with online discussion boards and the solutions to counteract those challenges. And then I'll also talk about the Socratic method of using online discussion boards. So let's go ahead and jump in. Hi. We have So one challenge or issue that we see in a lot of discussion assignments and courses is that they're actually a writing assignment and they're not conducive to conversation. So of course, discussion should be a dialogue. They should not be writing assignments, but we do somehow end up with a lot of prompts that look like a writing assignment. So those can look like an essay topic. A lot of times we see research requirements in a discussion board. If a prompt is requiring research, that's a pretty sure sign that it should actually be an assignment instead of a discussion. And then we also see a lot of times just a list of questions for students to answer and then submit for other students to see, which again, doesn't really generate a conversation. So this is an example of an actual discussion prompt in one of our online courses that will remain unnamed. But it has students go find a website that applies to any topic that's going to be covered in the course, name the website, give the URL, write your review of at least 100 words, and then respond to your classmates with questions or comments. So other than that last line of respond to two of your classmates with questions or comments, there's really nothing that would give students a chance to talk to one another about what they've done. So this is really an assignment, not a discussion. Another challenge we see is very restrictive requirements for the posts. So often we have a guideline for how many posts the students have to make, the word count for each of their posts. And sometimes in Canvas, we have that option where users must post before seeing replies. I will say sometimes that is useful, but sometimes, especially with the prompts that are more like an assignment, instructors use that feature so that students can't see each other's answers because they're all going to have the same answer. So this is an example of a restrictive posting prompt. So it says your initial post has to have 150 words. Your replies have to have a minimum of 50 words. And to receive full credit, you have to post 3 times. So the reason this is restrictive, the main reason is if we did that in a face-to-face discussion, it would be very unnatural. And really, this makes grading a lot easier for the instructor, but that's good for us. It's not necessarily good for the students. It makes it hard for students to really have a genuine, authentic conversation. Another challenge is closed-ended questions. So examples are up here. Any question that is going to get you an answer of yes or no, true or false, I agree or I disagree, but with no explanation would be considered a closed-ended question. And then lack of instructor involvement is a big issue in online classes, not just here, but everywhere. If you've taken an online class as a student, you probably have experienced this, but if the instructor is not involved and participating in the discussion, it would be the equivalent of you walking into a classroom, writing a discussion prompt on the board, telling students to discuss, and then walking out of the room. So I'm going to show a video. It's online discussion boards in real life, and it is cringy, but that is the point.
that discussion forums in our online courses and our blended courses, they're supposed to be something of a counterpart, right, to our face-to-face discussions. But have you ever wondered what it would be like to see an online discussion forum in real life?
Awesome. We were just getting to the people.
Like, 10 out of 10. Good job. 10 out of 10. Keep up the good work. 10 out of 10. Nice. 10 out of 10. Good job. 10 out of 10. Keep up the good work.
Does anyone feel like that's how your discussions go in your courses? What other challenges have you experienced in your online discussions that I maybe didn't cover?
One of the things I did last year that really helped was I had the students ask questions, like their original post, they had to pose questions about the content, which forced the responses to answer those questions. But then if there were questions asked at a later point, how do you get the student that they're replying to go back in and even look to see that somebody asked them a question about something they said?
So when we get to the Socratic method, part of the presentation will actually see an example discussion prompt that would hopefully help resolve that problem. Anyone else experience any challenges besides what we just went through?
I had like 5 people in class who are like really into it. And then like, you know, the 10 others who were just sort of taking classes.
Yes.
Lost sight of
Mm.
it. Oh, there's not going to
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like what you said, it feels like a chat room sometimes,
Mhm.
instead of like a academic or a assignment / discussion. I mean, I know that they're supposed to discuss, but it's more like, hey, how you doing? Instead of, or, you know, it just feels like a chat room. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, I get that.
One other thing is like, I find that a lot of the responses are going to the first 2 posts. It's like they don't read through everything that's there. Even some students, granted, post late, and so theirs don't usually get any replies. But if you have 10 people who have put an original post in there, like then the first 8 people that do replies do them to the first 2.
Mhm.
And they don't, it's like they don't scroll down and read. So like, how do you distribute? Get them to, so that everybody gets interaction.
That's good. Let's move on to some solutions, and hopefully we can give you some ideas for those specific scenarios, but we'll also talk about solutions for the challenges I just covered. So using additional materials besides the textbook is a good way to engage students. So you can do that with YouTube videos, TED Talks, images, articles, basically anything besides the textbook. It kind of just adds a fresh view to the content, but it also challenges students more so that they have to view a video or an article or something and connect it to the course content instead of just being able to go back to their textbook and regurgitate what they've read. And another idea is to require students to use multimedia for their discussion responses. It's been a while since I taught online, but I used to teach the college orientation course. And in the introduce yourself discussion, I recorded a video introduction of myself. And I just really wanted to try to get, that personal touch going early in the semester. And then I gave students the option to also respond with a video. I taught for, I think, 5 semesters and not a single time did a student reply with a video. So I think I would have had to make that a requirement for them to do it. But I know some other courses, I think, Roy, do you require a photo? A photo, not necessarily a video, but you can require a written response to ask them to attach a photo of themselves. Putting faces with names really helps build community early in the semester. And if you build that community early, hopefully that will feed into your other discussions throughout the course, and they might feel more comfortable actually discussing with each other.
Is it okay then if we alter different things for our master course shell?
Yes, so that is actually a great question, especially the introduce yourself. That is just a starting point, basically. You can customize that as much as you want. And in fact, I think people are starting to do that more and more, and it brings really good results. As far as the other discussions in the course besides the introduce yourself, as long as you're not getting too far away from assessing content, their understanding of course content, it's okay. I mean, you can customize your discussions, just you don't want to change all of them so much that they don't.
Yeah, it just like the way it applies. I had a class once that allowed, not here, but elsewhere, allowed for responses to either be the typical, like the narrative with the words, or they could do a PowerPoint presentation, or do a video, or they could do, and it was great. It actually built community in class. It was neat because people got to know each other.
Yeah, so even if you want to keep a prompt that's already in the master, but then add the requirement they have to reply with multimedia, absolutely,
Okay.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Yep. And then another example I put here is to post a YouTube video. This would be, if you're teaching a leadership class, but if you post a YouTube video showcasing a leadership challenge as the discussion prompt and then tell students to analyze the situation, then they have to connect their own experiences with the course concepts. And again, they're not just going back to the textbook and recycling the information that everyone's already read. Ask quality questions. And Ryan, this kind of comes back to what you just said. The canned answer that we have in online ed for content coming from the master is you can add or edit content, but don't remove content. So I would say, if you have a course that you don't feel like it has quality questions, feel free to edit them. Don't delete them. But as far as asking quality questions, you want to make sure that your questions are connected to the course outcomes and to other assignments in the course. When there are discussions that aren't connected to the other content, it just to the student feels like busy work. And of course, they're not going to be engaged when it feels like busy work. You want to ask questions that elicit critical thinking. So again, this goes back to asking open-ended questions. You don't want to just ask questions that are going to get you a yes or a no. Create opportunities for thinking outside the box, and I'll talk more about some ideas for that here in a minute. But asking yourself a few questions about your discussion prompts can help you recognize whether or not it's going to elicit critical thinking and whether it's an open-ended question. So, and also what purpose it serves. So that is one question. What purpose does this discussion serve? If your answer is not anything related to the course outcomes or trying to get them to challenge students to think outside the box or apply the content to their own real experiences, maybe that discussion isn't really serving a purpose. Does the discussion prompt foster dialogue, or is it just an assignment? And does the prompt make students think? And then here are some examples of open-ended questions. And again, those are going to be questions that go beyond yes, no answers or agree and disagree. So I won't read all of those to you, but some examples are, do you know of another instance where, what assumptions exist? Emphasize collaboration and depth of thought. So do any of you use the groups feature for discussions in Canvas? Do any of you teach face-to-face and have students break up into small groups for discussions? Okay, so the groups feature in Canvas would be the equivalent of that. So you can, if you want to know the technical aspect of how to do that, I can help you with that later. But it's really easy to set up. You can break students into whatever size group you want. So, just 3 students or 6 students, whatever you want. And they can discuss in smaller groups, and that really helps students get to know each other a little bit better too, as well as having usually better conversation.
So could we put them into groups for our discussions, to have them, to force them to respond to people just in the groups?
Mhm.
And then do that for a couple weeks and then change the groups so that
Yep.
they're in different.
Absolutely.
And then that would help alleviate I only responded to the first 2 people out of the
Yes.
15-person class.
Yep. And there's one course, I think it's the leadership course, BU 118 had, at least the older master had a group discussion prior to a related assignment. So the instructor broke students into 2 separate groups. They had to basically work on the assignment together in their discussion, and then move on to the assignment itself. But, that was, like I said, it was part of an assignment, but they also had to collaborate within their smaller groups. So there's just another use case for that feature. Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, on the slide about assignments masquerading as discussion, it said that if you ask for citation of sources, then it's probably an assignment. But like if I were to do something like a debate, like one of my big problems with discussions is that students are relying only on their opinion.
Okay.
And for my subject matter, like opinion is kind of worthless. Like, I do not care what you think. Like, I just want you to tell me something that is like data supported, like give me an argument that's somehow supported by data. So I don't know, I wouldn't do a debate or something where they had to reason through something, like, because to me, reason or logic is worthless. Like in my subject matter, I want them to tell me what has been researched, No,
that's a good point. So I would say having citations in and of itself is not a problem. It's just basically it depends on the prompt. We've seen discussions where it's basically a research assignment. It's go out and find this and then cite it. Kind of like the example that I showed where it's like, go find a website and give us the URL and then give your review of the website. That's a lot different than what you're talking about. So citations aren't a problem in and of themselves. It just depends on the type of prompt.
So the prompt is, so you're answering the prompt and say, make sure to support your prompt or your answer with credible sources.
Yeah.
So like, you know, when I'm in a class sometimes is, or, well, I guess it'd be called two, which is sort of the class. So I'll have them support. So they might say something really clear there, they'll have supporting support from the text, like with examples, like the type of example, just that chart, saying that. So therefore, I went to the text to see that. So they're doing analysis, and this is an example of how that can.
You know what I'm saying? Because you're really.
That's a good example. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this isn't like a discussion assignment, but I have an assignment where the students, and this would be for face-to-face and online, where they're writing lesson plans in a group. Would that group discussion feature, like, could I do a discussion and just say, any communication you guys do needs to be done any communication outside of class and the planning of this assignment, do it in this discussion?
Mhm.
Because then I can see who's doing what, like,
Yeah,
would that work?
yeah,
Okay.
that could get a little messy. I mean, if they're doing a lot of discussion
Well,
outside
they
of class,
do-
it could just be a
well,
lot for you.
No, they do it, they actually are doing, I give 2 full class days for them to do it in class, but sometimes they end up having to do just a tiny bit, like, you know, I'm gonna do this outside of class or whatever, so I just, and I never really know what's going on with that, so I'll just say communicate with each other through the discussion
Yeah.
board instead of texting.
Mhm.
Okay.
So there are some alternatives to question and answer prompts up here. Talitha already touched on, you know, doing a debate, you can do case studies, role plays, peer review and feedback, which I think those get used quite a bit in our English courses. Have students apply the content to either their future career, their current life situation, current events, anything like that. Any application-based discussion is probably gonna generate some pretty good conversation. And then have them brainstorm solutions to a problem. That's not an exhaustive list, but those are just some ideas for something besides here's a question, give me your answer type of post. And then I already mentioned this, but link concepts to current events, which we've had a ton of course developments in the last year or so that have done this. COVID has made it easy. I've worked on a lot of business course redevelopments and revisions, and you know, with like supply chain issues and all that kind of stuff. I've seen this happening more and more, and I think it's a really good idea. So also emphasize the quality of responses. And so when you're grading, I mentioned earlier with the restrictions with like, you have to post 150 words and 50 words in your reply and all that. It's easy to get caught up as the instructor in just giving a grade based on those requirements and not really grading on the quality of their answers. So it's important to focus grades not just on whether or not a student posted or if they met the word count, but you can even consider giving more points to students who give quality responses that advance the discussion. So maybe they're asking questions of their classmates and, you know, creating more conversation within that discussion post. You could give higher marks for that. You could discourage cluster posting, which that's making several posts in one day, or posting right before the deadline, which I know that happens all the time. I would say at this point, probably most of our masters have a little sentence in the discussion that say your first post is due by Wednesday or Thursday, and then your replies to your classmates are due by Sunday. And that really helps spread out the conversation. Terry, you were talking about how only the first couple of replies or first student replies generate conversation, and that could maybe be a solution. I know that's not going to totally solve that problem, but having students post by midweek really gets them thinking about the discussion earlier on, not just posting earlier on, but thinking about it. And then hopefully they're more likely to converse with their classmates as well. Yeah.
Sorry that I'm sure I'm interrupting you,
No.
but I wish there were an easier way to do that. Like, when I set up my assignment, I have rephrase it so it says initial post due on Thursday, and then I make an appointment on the calendar that says comments due on Sunday, But I just wish there were an easier way, like, to make am I missing out? Is there an easier way to make the discussion have 2 due dates?
There will be.
Okay.
It's not there yet. This is feedback we've heard since we adopted Canvas in 2015. And I'm sure Canvas has heard this feedback even sooner than that. They are finally putting it on their development roadmap. But
It's on the road now.
yes, I have not heard of a timeline,
Yeah.
which is probably a good thing.
I figured out kind of a way to handle that. So I create an assignment with a text box entry for the replies. And it says, it just says, go back to the discussion and post your 2 replies to your classmates. So it has a different due date because it's an assignment. And then I just say in the text box entry, type in, I posted my replies. And I do it as a non-graded assignment. And so that way it pops up as an assignment with a due date. They go in and they're like, oh yeah, I have to go back and do my replies. And that has helped a lot.
Yeah, because maybe an appointment calendar won't pop up on their to-do list of assignments, will it? I don't know.
No, it has to have a due date to pop up in their to-do list. So they would have to be looking at their calendar to see that.
Okay.
So you said you're setting your due date for the initial responses, the Thursday one?
Yeah, and then I'm keeping it open to 3 days beyond the due date.
Yeah.
Closing it after Sunday. And then I have a calendar appointment on Sunday saying.
Okay.
Post your.
So when I taught, I did kind of the opposite. I made the due date the Sunday night. And in my instructions on all the discussions, it said your initial response is due by Thursday, and this will be factored into your grade. And after the first couple of discussions, they knew I was serious. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to use lots of workarounds right now. I will say, I said it was on Canvas's roadmap. It's actually in development. I
Okay,
just don't know what the timeline is. Yes, it is going to happen. I just don't know when it's gonna happen. But yes, we are gonna have a big party when that finally gets done. It's been a long time coming. And that seems like it's something that, it's been requested so much, it seems like something they should have just built into begin with. But
I know.
I don't know. I'm not a software developer, so maybe it's harder than I think it is. And then another idea for getting better responses from students is the 3CQ method. Has anyone tried this? So you tell your students that their replies to their classmates have to include a compliment, a comment, a connection, and a question. So that forces them to go beyond just the, hey, that was a great idea type of reply.
I agree.
I agree. And as far as instructor participation, obviously good discussions don't run themselves. So you have to figure out how you want to be involved, and that can look different for each instructor. It might look different for each class. In every class, though, you should act as a neutral member of the group. Have a plan for how you want to facilitate your discussions. So are you going to participate in every discussion and reply to every student? Or that would be a lot. I wouldn't recommend it. Are you going to reply to 4 students in every discussion in the course? I would recommend participating in every discussion, but yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend trying to reply to every single student in every single discussion. So I think, Matt, like 4 years ago, you told me that you replied to like 3 students in each discussion. And am I remembering correctly, you choose a different 3 students for each discussion. So basically, at some point in the course, you're interacting with every student in a discussion.
I try to set that, on the intros, I'll respond to every student just simply to try to be more welcoming.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the course of the semester, I try to be, really, specifically hit each student. And then also one thing I like to do is, if it's got a lot of replies, that's cool. There's already conversation going on there. Let's see if we can spark a conversation in this person's post. And so I try to go after a post that doesn't have a reply yet. But
Yeah, and so Terry, I'm sure you're already involved in your discussions, but that problem with only the first couple of replies getting conversation, maybe if you jump in and initiate some more discussion on the posts that don't have any replies, that might help other students jump on there too. But whatever your plan is for facilitation, make sure you communicate it to your students. So they know, okay, my instructor is actually going to be participating in these. They're going to be talking to me. This is how much I should expect to hear from them directly in the discussion.
Any tips for how to participate without feeling outside?
Join the discussion.
Does anyone else ever have that where you post like a response to a discussion and then you don't want to like respond? Yeah, he's watching and even though there's questions, it seems like.
What type of responses are you posting? Or
Just like
statements
talking
or
about different like
questions?
statements, but then I throw in some questions too.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes and then I feel really awkward. And then my social anxiety gets.
That happened to me too when I was teaching. I guess it didn't really bother me
Okay.
What
that.
have you to make sure this was really stupid?
Should we really be in college?
Don't tell them.
I bring in some like tournaments or something. Yeah, try to order something from that.
What have you tried, like, because I know there were times when I would post questions, like somebody would say something and then I would go in and post a question or two. I would then message the student, say, hey, not sure if you saw, I posted questions in your discussion. Can you make sure that you circle back to that and answer those questions?
There you go.
Because sometimes they may not know.
My social anxiety.
So I haven't done it yet. To address that problem, one of the things that I consider doing is then having the discussion relevant to an assignment in some way. So you have to go back and look at it. So if it was a question, or sometimes I'll like provide a resource, somebody like, hey, and I'll recognize it as something that they might use on that assignment. And, I'll post something on the discussion that says something like, hey, consider this for, your assignment. And then it just disappears from, their world. And I'm like, okay, well, that was pointless. But if it's the assignment itself, after, hey, go back to the discussion board, mine that for anything that might be relevant to what you're doing. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't tried it yet, but.
That's a great idea.
We'll see.
You should just come finish this presentation.
Yeah.
Also, in addition to communicating how you're going to participate in your discussion boards, you want to have very clear guidelines and expectations that are communicated to your students, which in most of our masters, we have the posting expectations and all that. But a lot of people use rubrics and things, which are great, but students don't read things. We all know this, right? So this is another place where using a video would be a good way to communicate with your students. They're probably more likely to watch a video and make it, 5 minutes or less. Just telling them what your expectations are for discussions, because they're more likely to watch a video than to read all of that.
Do you think that's true? I always imagined that if they have the option of seeing like 3 sentences they can read versus, this video is 2 minutes, I'm just gonna read the 3 sentences.
I would say do both. And honestly, that's an accessibility best practice as well.
Yeah.
Multiple means of representation. So, and multiple means of communication. So then they have the option of watching or reading, and they can choose what works best for them.
Yeah, this worked out in the past with last I taught, I did video and then did like 3 bullets underneath just the highlights. They don't watch the video.
Yeah.
They probably won't.
I wonder if it would be helpful at the beginning to, like, when you're talking about the purpose of discussions is to do a dialogue, would be maybe someone in here would volunteer to get with me to do a little video of, like the the responses that are like, maybe there'll be a comment and then they'll go, great post. And it's like, I always like, am like, would you do that in a discussion in class? And just be like, great idea to lighten it.
Terry, I liked your comment.
Supportive if you are.
Great thought process.
Like, yeah, to do a little video of like that. No, we would not do this in an in-class discussion. That is not what we do in these discussions.
It would be cute to have a visual representation of that, because that is what we see.
So who wants to volunteer with me to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We all-
Nice.
We could have a classroom with one person leading it, and everybody else go, great job.
Oh, yeah.
I like it. So another idea for messaging students, I hadn't thought about it as far as trying to get them to answer your questions, but if you notice that any students aren't contributing to discussions in the first couple weeks of class, privately messaging them to check in is a really good idea, because if they can get away with it in the first couple of weeks, they're probably going to keep trying to get away with it for the whole semester. So just encouraging that community and discussion early on, hopefully will make the rest of the semester go a little more smoothly. And then as far as feedback, providing early feedback is important. And that way, if students want to update their answers or add more to their thoughts, they have time to do that. So just like we want students to post their initial discussions typically midweek, it's important to give them feedback early as well, so they still have a few days to respond or make updates to their reply and anything like that. And then make sure your feedback is thoughtful, just like we don't want students to say, I agree, or that's awesome, you're so smart. Obviously, we shouldn't be doing that as instructors either. And so I mentioned the Socratic method. So we'll just talk briefly about what that is. So basically the Socratic method requires you to continue to ask questions until a wrong answer is exposed or you are satisfied with the student's reply. So you just keep asking questions. It requires a lot of deep thought. It takes definitely some instructor involvement, obviously, and some time. These are the 6 types of Socratic questions: clarification, challenging assumptions, evidence and reasoning, alternative viewpoints, implications, and challenging the question. And then I put some examples up here as well. So there are a couple different ways you could incorporate the Socratic method. One is, as the instructor, when you're responding to students, ask them open-ended questions that encourage reflection. And then you could also have students use this method with each other in their replies, which you don't necessarily have to tell them, hey, we're going to use the Socratic method, but here are some example posting guidelines that would basically encourage or force students to use the Socratic questioning method. So saying your initial post is due Thursday, read through the post and respond to one of your classmates in the form of a question. So students don't even have the opportunity to say, I agree, because they're supposed to reply with a question. And then it gives examples of questions. And this goes back to the chart I just showed you with the types of Socratic questions. And then students would be required to reply to the questions that were asked on their post. And Terry, this also might help solve the problem of, the first 2 posts getting answers. You could also say you must ask a question on a post that doesn't have any replies yet.
Or limit the number of replies that can, like, if the first 2 always have 10. Say, reply to a post that has.
If there are 2 replies, move on to a different post. If there are already 2 replies, move on to a different post.
Yeah. So this has nothing about how many times students have to reply. It has nothing about word count, but it's going, if it is used correctly, if students participate correctly, it would be a really thorough, deep discussion. much deeper than a discussion that says reply in 150 words. You must post 3 times.
Well, but then if they don't put the depth in these, then it's gonna be pretty clear and obvious, I would think, while
Right.
you're reading through that they're not
Mhm.
putting the depth in the knowledge, and then that can be reflected in the written.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And then I didn't make a slide about this, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but another idea out there right now with online discussions is gamification. And of course, gamification is a huge, I don't want to call it a fad, I think it's here to stick around, but it's a big thing right now in learning in general. It can be applied to discussions as well. So things like allowing students to update their replies to get a better grade, it would be a type of gamification. Giving them points, based on the depth of their response and not just based on the word count and all that kind of stuff. So there are methods for gamifying online discussions. The reason I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it is, one, if you want to try gamification, I would absolutely encourage it, but try it in just 1 or 2 discussion boards, because if every discussion in your class is gamified, then they're going to lose. It's not going to motivate them if it's in every discussion. So use it sparingly, but also that type of interaction, gamification in general, doesn't motivate every type of student either. So it might help your discussions with some students, and it might keep others from getting engaged at all. So there's a brief overview of gamification. Like I said, it can be used in discussions. I would do it sparingly. If anyone wants to try it out, I'm not aware of anyone doing gamification. Are you? Can you tell us how?
I've done a couple of things. One of them was in a hybrid class. Actually, I did this with a couple of hybrid classes. So we also had an in-person component that we could play around with. So I had them do, I can't remember what exactly the activity was, but I had them do an activity in class. Actually, this worked the best in the class, which is Zoom class, because I had 2 different school districts that were competing with each other. And so, which was kind of fun. But they did an activity, and I think it involved something visual or something like that. And then they would post it to the discussion board. Then I turned on like it. So whoever got the most likes ended up winning. And so that ended up, being the competition. So, what did people end up actually liking out of all the things that were produced? Which was surprisingly, they were engaging for them. But again, you can't do that too much, or they'll run out. The other thing I did was actually on the literature course at a different institution, but I did what was called a table of game. So you have an initial post that had some requirements, and then we go in and take something from that post that you thought was interesting, quote it, and then ask a question, leave a question about whatever that was. Okay, so so let's say it was somebody observed that this character could have made a different choice, and wonder why they made this choice, and then someone would say, take that out and say, oh yeah, I noticed that too. What would have happened if they had done this differently? And then the third step is you have to reply to that question to that person left. And then it had let's say mixed results. Again, the people who were engaged were really engaged and asked some really provocative questions and got some really provocative responses. And a few people were just like, would miss the third step and would never reply or something like that. But for the ones that worked for it, they worked well. So proceed with caution.
That's great. Does anyone else have anything that you're doing in your online courses that we could learn from?
One of the things I don't teach Intro to Ed online till spring. So I did it in a couple of discussions last semester, but I think I'm gonna do it in all of the discussions. Is instead of doing the post on Thursday, reply by Sunday thing, the original post will be due either Thursday or Sunday, and then the replies won't be due until the following week. And I figured that way. I don't know, I'm just gonna try it and see. I thought that way maybe it's like they're not circling back the same week and forgetting, although I do create that other assignment. But, and then too, the other thing with that is they're still thinking about the information we talked about last week while we're going into new information. It's still requiring them to kind of review that information we were doing last week.
Kind of along those lines, another thing that I had seen when preparing for this was doing a semester-long discussion board. The tricky part about that is, HLC correspondence courses. So we can't make every discussion an open semester-long discussion. Because students would probably wait till the last week of class to respond to any of them. But, you could throw in one or two and see what happens with that. And maybe try it with a pretty basic prompt at first, like, hey, if you have, a point in the textbook or the content that you're muddy on or you need help with, just leave that discussion open all semester. We got rid of the Ask Your Instructor forum. I don't know if you noticed that. We used to have that. We got rid of it because no one ever used it. So I don't know that type of discussion would really work that well, but some instructors at other institutions are trying that out, so.
I put up a complaints discussion board one time, just like any complaints that you have. we should turn on. Again, mixed success.
Yeah.
I think that also depends on the kind of how bold the student is. If I really want to complain in front of everybody else.
Right.
I can't complain.
Well, and at a conference, this was when I first started here, so it was a while ago. I went to a presentation on discussions, and the presenter, he was an instructor, a full-time instructor, said that he always had a discussion board in his classes that had nothing to do with the course. So like post your favorite recipe, that kind of thing, which sounds hokey. But he said that it typically worked really well and that he often did get responses from students, and it was a really good way to build community and, have a little fun and not just focus on the course content. Any other ideas? I think I learned more from you guys than you learned from me, so thank you for the good discussion.